Good morning, Living as a Disciple students. Welcome to our latest Ed puzzle. Share my screen with you and we will get started. Today we are talking about global inequalities. So one of the things we think of most when we think of injustice, extreme poverty, and hunger throughout the country. Lab 3, Day 3 homework. So as I said before, world hunger and poverty are two of the most prevalent social justice issues. I mean, the fact that thousands of people die every day from both hunger, from thirst, from poverty. And both of these are a result of social sin, of years of inequality that have kind of built upon one another. And the book mentions that there are four major structures that need to be addressed in order to fight these issues. And all of these are interconnected. First is the lack of democratic government. Second is a lack of development or infrastructure. Third is the gap between rich and poor. And fourth is the lack of just wages. So let's take a look at each of these. First is the lack of democratic governments. As many of you have probably learned in history class, the period of the 1900s was when a lot of the 1800s, there was a lot of rampant colonialism, which is when a nation maintains or exerts its control over a foreign country or territory. So you all know that the US used to be a colony of Britain. We talked about India and Gandhi and the nonviolence movement. India used to be a colony of Britain as well. The US has had numerous colonies. Basically, they reap the benefits of having this land, of basically taking resources from a foreign land and putting that on the people. So by 1914, Europe and its former colonies, which included the US, controlled 84% of the world. And though colonialism ended in the mid-1900s, the effects of it were still felt. There were many poor countries, and many of the poorest countries today are also the most corrupt. You had small elite groups that don't govern with the common good in mind. The effects of colonialism, of this control of resources, was still felt. You have countries such as in Central and South America who choose to grow cash crops, such as like tobacco or sugar, or coffee, as opposed to actual crops that could feed their people. A lot of these powerful groups will divert foreign aid. They'll have lenient tax laws, etc., that do not promote the common good. So Catholic social teaching endorses democracy in order to avoid this gap between rich and poor. So in addition to the effects of colonialism or the lack of democratic governments, another problem is the lack of development. So infrastructure are the basic facility, services, and physical systems needed for functioning of a community or society. So you think about our country, right, or you think about our school, our infrastructure would be the actual building. It would be a lot of the different telephone lines that get here, the wireless, the internet, the water, and the plumbing, all things that allow our society, our community to function. Infrastructure could also include public education. It can include transportation, whether that be buses, trains, or even having roads for cars, water and energy supply, etc. You can't have a functioning society if you didn't have, Ameren, or you didn't have Spire, or you didn't have Missouri Water Company. Those all allow our society to function. Fun fact for you, there's actually enough food in the world for everyone to eat 3,600 daily calories. So we don't have a lack of food, but the lack of infrastructure makes distribution impossible. The majority of that food is eaten, right, in places like the United States or globalized areas, and we don't have the infrastructure, the roads, the transportation, the energy to distribute that to the entire world. Another huge issue is the lack of clean water. Many countries do not have clean water, do not have access to clean water, and this is huge. So 80% of illnesses in developing countries are because the water is dirty. Half of all the world's hospital beds are a result of unclean water. This also leads to a huge loss of education and time for women fetching water, and many third world countries, it's the women's job to get the water. Many of them have to walk miles in order to find a clean water source, which ends up being a lot of time and energy that could be spent, helping with a business, could be spent in school. So you get a lot of, not only do you have this lack of access to clean water, but you have a missed opportunity as well, especially for women. And then, probably don't have to get into details here, but just based on biology, right? Many women drop out of school by puberty. If there's no running water, if there's no plumbing systems, then once their cycles start, they're not able to, many of them are not able to stay in school. So lack of clean water is also something that is definitely very much a woman's issue throughout the world. Now on to our final slide, the gap between rich and poor and just wages. So combining these two reasons. So we've talked about this before, but in the US, the top 20% own 84% of the nation's wealth. And the bottom 40% own 0.3% of the nation's wealth. And income inequality is actually growing, both in this country and in the world. And this creates a cycle that's hard to stop, because the people who have wealth have access to resources, they have access to political influence, which allows them to get the type of laws or the type of structures they want in the government, which leads to more wealth. It creates a cycle that's hard to stop, both in this country and throughout the world. So what many people suggest is something called a just or a living wage, which would be a salary that recognizes the value of work and that allows a laborer and his or her family to live a life with dignity. So a living wage allows people to live their lives with dignity in order to provide for their family and acquire the things that they want to acquire. Stop sharing my screen with you. Celebrity appearance. As always, what do we do at the end of a video, Liz?
Like, share, comment, subscribe, do it all.